It's a people, it's a community, it's a life, it's a heart, it's a spirit.
The heck would you want a picture of a tattoo of $1,000 on your penis for?
The medications that have now come out really make HIV a manageable disease.
Like I said, in today's market, real estate alone has gone up 15%.
So sometimes there is no battle. Lately, if I don't get my musket dirty, that's great with me.
The cops were pushing her and egging her on to get her nuts. They were calling her names.
And then I find that the actors and actresses, for the most part, are like sponges. They soak up whatever you get back to them.
And he kept explaining to me that I wasn't gay, that you cannot be gay.
Religion and spirituality are big, big topics these days. I mean, the bookshelves, the bookstores are full of
incest, not funny. Midgets, not funny. Incestuous midgets.
Good evening and welcome to Talking About. My name is John Griffith, I'm your host, and tonight's topic is Alzheimer's disease, and my guest is the Director of Education and Training of the Alzheimer's Association of New York, Della Fraser Rios. Welcome.
Thank you, it's very nice to be here.
It's good to have you, and well, let's just jump right in and give an overview of what Alzheimer's is.
Alzheimer's is a progressive, degenerative, neurological disorder that leads to death.
Okay. Are there any known causes of Alzheimer's?
We're not sure of the causes. We have suspicion about some of the causes. For example, you may have heard talk of the amyloid plaques that form on the nerve cells in the brain, or the neurofibrillary tangles that form within the brain cells themselves.
In layman's terms, a little bit more, exactly what does that involve? Is that sort of a buildup that
it builds up of this. Amyloid is a natural substance occurring in the body, in the brain, and throughout the body. And the thing that happens, the thing that we see in Alzheimer's disease is that rather than this being a liquidy substance, that it becomes a tarry substance and clumps together and adheres to the nerve cells in the brain. That's one of the things we see. Another thing that we see is that these structures that are used to maintain the shape of the cells, very much like when you see a building being erected and you see the steel beams are used to maintain the structure of that building. Well, there are these neurofibrillary components of the brain cells that are used to maintain the structure of the brain cell. And rather than, they usually run parallel. They look sort of like railroad tracks.
Okay.
And what happens in Alzheimer's disease is they get distorted and they become intertwined. So rather than running parallel and maintaining the structure of the cell, they turn on themselves and the structure collapses. And another thing we see is that there's a chemical called acetylcholine. It's what's known as a neurotransmitter. And we know that acetylcholine is produced by the brain cells, and in Alzheimer's, we see a decrease in that chemical. The significance of that is that very much like water conducts electricity.
It's going through my head.
Is that what you're thinking
Yes.
about? That's exactly the right image to have, because that's the way acetylcholine works in the brain. It helps get a message from one brain cell to the next. And with the acetylcholine being lowered in Alzheimer's, there's less of that chemical to facilitate the communication from one cell to the next. And those are the things we see happening in Alzheimer's. Exactly what causes all that to happen, we don't know. There's a great deal of research
being done. I mean, does family history have, or genetics have a factor in?
There's thought to be that there may be a genetic component, most specifically in a very small number of cases of Alzheimer's, in what we call early onset familial Alzheimer's, where one would see typically a number of people in successive generations who had Alzheimer's disease.
You said younger onset, so that would be younger than the typical onset. And what would the typical age range of risk be?
the typical age range would be, well, let me put it this way, that it's really a disease of the aging for the most part, and that about 50% of people over 85 years old have Alzheimer's, and about 20 to 25% of the people 75 years old or older have Alzheimer's. About 10% of people over 65. So you can see that it is predominantly a disease of the aging.
Okay, and speaking of aging, people get a little bit forgetful and they say, yeah, I'm having a senior moment, or, you know, forgive me, I'm having a blonde moment. Yeah, I hear a lot.
What's that?
How do you know if it's just normal aging or if it could possibly be Alzheimer's?
Well, one of the things that I think about when I think about that sort of thing is when I'm sitting in my living room and I'm thinking, did I shut the coffee maker off in the kitchen? Well, I get up and I go to the kitchen, and I get to the kitchen, I think, why did I come here, right? And I go back to the living room, and I'll remember, I'll say, oh, yes, you know, at some point I'll remember I wanted to check the coffee maker. Someone with Alzheimer's is not likely to remember once they go into the kitchen that there was any reason to be there at all. They're not going to remember. The differences in the quality of the forgetting is that with Alzheimer's disease, it's much more serious kind of forgetting, a forgetting that really interferes with the activities of living.
Okay. For example,
frequently forgetting that you have appointments and having no recollection that those appointments even existed.
Okay, so I mean, nothing would jog the memory of that. I know I need to write everything down.
Right, but you have a way then to retrieve the information, and when you see it, you recognize it. Right?
And with Alzheimer's, you lose this ability.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Yes.
And if somebody recognizes they or a loved one might have a problem with forgetting, they're noticing, a little bit more signs and warning signs.
Should we talk a little bit about some of the warning signs?
That might be a good idea.
You were really asking me that, right? I realize that. Sorry.
I have a roundabout backwards way of doing things sometimes.
Or maybe I have a roundabout backwards way of understanding things.
Warning signs.
Warning signs. Let's talk about what a family might typically see. Sometimes the very first thing that you see is you call mom and you're told the phone is disconnected. And, and out of concern, you go and check, see what's happening. And there in the kitchen drawer are all the phone bills. And mom just isn't able to handle paying the bills anymore. Or maybe pays the bills 3 or 4 times over. Very often, the first sign you may see is financial difficulty, presentation. Or you go to pick up Dad for Cousin Emily's birthday party, and you arrive, and Dad's still in his pajamas, and you say, Dad, we have to get to Emily's for her birthday party. Well, why didn't you tell me? You say, but I did. We talked about this. No, you didn't. So that it's that kind of forgetting. Those are some of the things you might see.
What about repetitive questions?
Yes, certainly. What time is it? Or when are we going to the doctor's? And even though it's a week away, they may be asking that 10 times a day or 50 times a day or 100 times a day. A loss of initiative is another thing that you might see. Someone who loved to paint, for example, may just stop doing that. May be too hard to get it all together, to set up the canvas, think about what you want to paint, get the paints and brushes arranged.
Or even, once you start painting, what am I painting?
Yes, that's right. Just a loss of executive function, the ability to identify a need, make a plan to address it, and then to implement that plan is often lost. I think, when I'm going home from work, what am I going to make for dinner? Do I have anything at home? well, no, I don't, so I need to stop at the supermarket and I'll pick up whatever I need. And when I get home, I'm going to start to prepare what's going to take the longest to prepare. So that at some point in the evening, a meal comes together on the table. Right. Someone with Alzheimer's is not able to do that. They're not able to put all those pieces together and make them happen.
Okay, so then sort of using a puzzle analogy, if you have the pieces of the puzzle, they just don't quite fit together the way they did?
Yes, I think that would be accurate to say that. That's true.
Okay, and let's get back to the end of the question.
Okay.
If you start to see these warning signs, what do you do? Let's start with, if you see them within yourself. Let's start there.
Okay. I think it would be wise to speak to your physician, and if you don't, if you're not presently under someone's care, we live in a part of the world that has all these dementia research centers that are especially skilled at diagnosing whether or not there is a problem, and then what might be the cause of the problem. It's critical to get early diagnosis, primarily because there are dementias that are reversible. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take a little sidetrack here.
Dementia?
Yes,
okay.
To talk about dementia. Dementia is not a diagnosis. It's a set of symptoms. It means memory loss. It means impaired judgment and or personality changes and loss of physical functioning. Very much like a fever means an elevated body temperature. A fever is not a diagnosis. One needs to find out the cause of that fever in order to properly treat it. So too with dementia, one needs to find out the cause of that cluster of symptoms, right. The memory loss, the loss of physical functioning, and the impaired judgment or personality changes in order to treat those symptoms properly. And there are lots of causes for dementia, some of which are reversible. So it's critical to find out what's causing those symptoms.
What's causing proper diagnosis.
So that you go about getting a proper diagnosis,
exactly.
So that it can be treated. Thyroid disease can cause, there are metabolic disorders that can cause
chemical
reversible.
Imbalances.
Yes, that's right. That can cause reversible dementia. So
get treatment. What if you're a family member or a friend who recognizes possible symptoms and the person is reluctant to seek treatment or go out and get a possible diagnosis, to see a doctor?
Certainly what one would try to do would be to help that person understand the benefits of seeking a diagnosis and being there for that person, to sort of, I would say, tease apart what the person's concerns are and help address those concerns so that the person can overcome that obstacle. One of the things that's very telling in the difference between normal aging and Alzheimer's disease is that when you hear someone say, I'm having that senior moment, as you said earlier, they're self-reporting that they're experiencing some difficulty with their memory. It's quite different than someone else identifying that there's a problem with your memory.
It could put you on the defensive.
Well, it could put you on the defensive, but it's also, people in normal aging often report that I don't remember names as well, or it takes me longer.
Names. Yeah, I can't remember what I had for lunch sometimes.
But you say that, right? It's not me saying, oh, Jonathan, I've noticed that you're having difficulty remembering when I speak to you, that I called you last night, that sort of thing.
I still can't remember what I had for lunch.
Maybe it wasn't very memorable.
Okay, so going about getting a diagnosis, what information do you need to present to your doctor?
I think you need to present a history of what's causing your concerns. Also, any information about past medical conditions, hypertension, a history of strokes, certainly information about a familial, your family's history. And if you're having difficulty with your memory, it would be wise to bring someone with you that knows that history. So that I think of a man I know who was being examined in the emergency room for a possible coronary. And the cardiologist was asking the man about his family history. You know, what did your mother die of? What did your father? And I so clearly remember him saying, you know, Doc, I used to know the answers to those questions, but since I've been dealing with this Alzheimer's thing, I just can't remember. So if someone is really having a memory problem, someone who can answer those questions needs to be with the person to give a good history.
To give a good history. And going about finding the diagnosis, what is there testing? I mean, what kind of tests?
Complete physical, history, physical, psychological evaluation. Want to rule out that this is being caused by depression or other similar kinds of problems. Also scans, CAT scans, MRIs, which an MRI over time, for example, can show that there is actual shrinkage of the brain. I mean, over time, it's a very important diagnostic tool. There's also a PET scan, which measures the metabolism of the brain. The glucose, sugar, is the main energy source for the brain. And the rate at which sugar is metabolized is indicative, or can be indicative if there's a slowing down of that metabolism, can be indicative of Alzheimer's disease. And it's all of these things combined. There's not one single test. Cognitive testing. There's certainly the disease centers, the Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers, do extensive cognitive testing, along with neurological testing and all the other things I've mentioned, to form a picture. And from this picture, Alzheimer's disease can be diagnosed with a 90% degree of accuracy, which is the same degree of accuracy that pneumonia can be diagnosed with. So it's a very high level of accuracy today.
Okay, and with all this testing, what's the average time frame from when you first go to the doctor to having your diagnosis? Is it a short period of time? And it sounded like there's a lot of testing to go through from diagnosis.
There is a fair amount of testing, and it would vary, I would think. I don't know exactly how long, but it would vary from physician to physician, from institution to institution. But I would say on the outside, within a month or two, would be my best guess.
And how difficult is it to find a knowledgeable physician in this area?
It's really not difficult. We live in a medical mecca, don't we? There are three nationally funded three Alzheimer's Disease Research Centers, which are nationally funded by the National Institute of Aging, and they're located at Columbia, Mount Sinai, and New York University Medical Center. Also, I mean, there are diagnostic centers here in Queens. Elmhurst is a diagnostic center. Parker Jewish is a diagnostic center. Neurologists are skillful at identifying Alzheimer's. I mean, this is a neurological disorder. And anyone who is looking for a diagnostic center, all they need to do is call the Alzheimer's Association New York City chapter, and we'd be happy to
And
help
the phone
them.
number is?
Thank you for asking. It's 212-983-0700. And we have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week helpline to answer calls.
And if you didn't get that, that's going to be on the screen at the end of the show.
Great, thank you.
So, okay, we have a diagnosis now.
Right.
What can be expected of the progression of the disease? Does it hit hard and fast, or is it long and drawn out?
This can be a very long illness, up to 20 years. So it's a slow progression generally. And usually the onset is so insidious and so slow that it takes time to even realize that you have. But once you do, and you're diagnosed, as I say, it can take as long as 20 years. Probably the average lifespan from diagnosis to death is about 8 years. We break the illness down for our purposes into 3 stages: early, middle, and late.
Okay. Signs of early, I mean, let's break it down even further and work through the progression.
Okay. Early stage can last anywhere from 1 to 4 years. People are still fairly independent in the early stage. They still are traveling, they're driving, etc. Middle stage is probably the longest point of the illness. It can last 10 years. And this is where the symptoms often get more complex to deal with. This is where sometimes people hallucinate, have paranoid, problems with paranoia, do things that they become disinhibited, so they forget what's socially appropriate.
So this is sort of a phase where somebody goes from independence to needing part-time and then full-time care.
Correct. And then in the late stage, the person can really no longer do anything for themselves and is totally dependent on someone else for all their care. They're bedridden and incontinent and may have lost all of their language. Language is something that's lost progressively through the course of the illness. And someone in the late stage may have just a few words left in their vocabulary.
Right. So I know somebody who lost most of the English language, seems almost like a 4-year-old, regressed to the German language, is still on occasion able to carry a moment or two of conversation in German, but and then it goes away. It's the good days, bad days.
And it's long-term memory, isn't it? I guess that
would be childhood.
Yes, so that was the longest memory.
Right.
Interesting.
So, and okay, getting into full-time care.
Right. And the late stage lasts anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And people at this point either have full-time care at home, or this may be the point at which people are admitted to a nursing home. Sometimes in the middle stages, people are admitted to the nursing home because the behaviors are difficult to manage.
Do you find sometimes that families might wait a little bit too long for full-time care, just because of the emotional baggage that comes along with, I'm putting mom in a home.
Right, and something I promised I would never do, or whatever, or never wanted to do at any rate. Yes, caregivers tend to wait over long, and as a consequence suffer poor health themselves. I mean, the immune status of caregivers is lower than the general population of their age. They suffer, use more medications, make more physician visits because they tend to wait longer to make those visits, to take care of themselves.
So it can be physically and emotionally draining on the caregiver.
Absolutely.
As well. And financially as well.
Financially as well. It's a very expensive illness because it's so long.
What can the typical cost of care be?
The figures show about $175,000 for a lifetime for one person.
For one person.
For one person.
So
and my guess is that as this gets resurveyed, we're going to see it's significantly more than that even. It's very costly.
Very costly. I mean, are there percentages of people living with Alzheimer's and projected numbers?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
You're thinking of?
I was thinking of a certain number of million now. And
I see. Yes. We believe there are 4 million people in the United States today with Alzheimer's disease, and with the baby boomers, with the aging of the baby boomers, and the people living longer, we expect that we're going to see, by the year 2050, we're going to see over 14 million. The numbers range between 14 and 16.2 million. And when we consider the resources that number would require, it just is beyond our understanding how that could ever be met. so that it's
So research needs to be done.
Critical.
Long-term care insurance.
Yes, yes, important piece to have.
Okay. We have about 3 minutes left. Time flies.
Wow, it does.
It's the Alzheimer's Association of New York.
Okay, we are actually a national association.
Okay.
It's the Alzheimer's Association. We're the New York City chapter. There are chapters that cover all the states in the United States. We cover the 5 boroughs.
And exactly what do you do?
What? And the way we cover the 5 boroughs is we have certainly the 24-hour helpline, and the number I understand you said would be on the screen again.
You can repeat it.
212-983-0700.
And on the web is
www.lz.org. .org is the national.
Okay.
And the New York City chapter is www.alzheimernyc.org. And we have over 100 support groups for caregivers. We also have support groups for early stage people with Alzheimer's disease. We have educational programs to assist at at various points throughout the disease, both for professionals and for family caregivers. We have a safe return program, which unfortunately we didn't get to talk about.
Okay, quick overview.
Quickly, wandering, 65% of people
yes.
with Alzheimer's disease wander at some point in the illness, and this is a life-threatening situation. The Safe Return Program is a way to guard someone against the hazards of wandering and to protect the person at home or in a facility. So you can just call us, and we'll be happy to enroll you in the Safe Return Program. For anything, call us about anything. We're available 24 hours a day to help with any issue involving Alzheimer's.
From our discussion and just from looking at the website, there's a wealth of information available through the Alzheimer's Association. And there's a whole lot more to learn.
Yes. Yes, and this is a long illness, and understand that you're not going to learn everything in this half-hour show.
So, and it is a half-hour show, and I truly, truly want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful that you are interested in putting this information forward for people.
Well, the show is all about helping people, and I hope we've been able to help you. We're just about out of time. We're going to be wrapping up now. So again, I thank you, and I thank you for watching, and tune in again. Visit our website, www.talkingabout.info. We'll have links to the Alzheimer's Association site, as well as the phone number, which will be coming on the screen. Anyway, again, thank you, and good night. Thank you.
Good night.